on this episode of Spirit Talk.
From what the general said, they and the other two astronauts I knew, they get here roughly 35 light years in about 3 months. And the whole concept of time is nothing like mankind has invented, as you know, with the wormhole thing or whatever you want to call it. They're here. They need to live here, and there's thousands of them allegedly from these scientists and people that would know that I've met with have confirmed they are living in underground facilities and underwater and have been for quite a while.
Hi, I'm Chris Fleming, the creator of Spirit Talk. You're listening to the podcast where I'll be bringing you the greatest thinkers, researchers, and contributors from around the world to discuss what we know in the field of the paranormal, life after death, and the pursuit of higher consciousness. Hey, it's Chris Fleming. Welcome back to Spirit Talk, and thank you for sticking around. I know it's been a while since I've done some podcasts. There's just been so much going on. And there's been a lot of gaps, and I understand that. But I can tell you this. I have a list. I have a list of people that I want to interview and that I'm going to be interviewing. I've already discussed it with them as soon as I get back from filming. I've been filming overseas for a special project. Can't tell you what it is yet, but you will know in the beginning of 2022. But in the meantime, I have a variety of guests that I've written down, and I've spoken to some of them to interview them. The interesting thing is a couple months ago, I had been talking to some of the babysitters I grew up with, and they shared with me their stories of the hauntings that went on in our house in Park Lane. Not only the things that they witnessed that I never knew about, but also the perspective of how they were comforting my sister and I when we were going through a lot of this paranormal stuff that was going on, and what they were experiencing or watching happen to us. So I'm going to have them on to discuss. Also, interesting, a guy that was behind the scenes of the QAnon conspiracy. You know, the stuff that was going on over social media saying there's a Q drop and this and that, and that the government's behind this and that, and, you know, caused in the January 6th insurrection that happened in the United States. All that craziness was caused by select individuals that live in another country. And it was all made up, and unfortunately, a lot of people bought into it. This guy is going to come on here. He's going to talk about that. If you've ever seen the movie or the documentary on HBO called Q Into the Storm, I suggest you watch it. He's actually on there. And it's going to be interesting to have him on, what he has to say. Plus, a couple other friends of mine, ghost hunters and stuff like that, to talk about the paranormal and deep dive more into consciousness and various alternate timelines that I want to get into, as well as talk about some of the shows we've done in the past, having their guests on, Kirsty Lizzie Borden, talk about that. But what I'm going to do is, I know I've missed like May, June, July, August, September, October. So I'm going to record some of those episodes and then backdate them. And we're going to call them the Lost Podcasts. All right? That work? I hope it works. Anyway, let's get to the guest that I have on this podcast. A friend of mine had contacted me and said, hey, you've got to interview this guy. He knows so much about the UFOs and aliens. He's met some of the military people, top secret information. You got to talk to him. So I spoke to him. This interview is very raw. I just let him talk. He is a source of information, and the information he's got, this top secret classified information, as well as stuff that may be known about, is just phenomenal. So because of this, he wanted to leave his last name out. So we're just going to call him Jim. All right? We'll be right back. Jim, do I have permission to record you? Today's date is November 7th, 2021.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jim, like you were referred to me by a friend of mine that you work with, and he had told me that you are very familiar with the UFO field. You've had your own personal interest, and over a long period of time, you have met a lot of individuals in the UFO field that are big names, and you've learned a lot of stuff from them. Can you share with us, and I understand that you don't want to use your last name, do your line of work, so I will not be using your last name. We'll just call you Jim. how did you first get interested and involved in the UFO alien phenomenon?
Well, I was raised on a little chicken farm outside of Missouri, and my dad bought me a pony. I was like 6 years old or so, and there was a little airport just down the road from the farm. So I had a pony cart. So I'd go over and give their kids pony rides, and their dads would give me rides in their airplanes and stuff, and let me fly around the plane a little bit. So I went to the local little country library, and I was reaching for flying books on the second shelf. I wasn't real tall, and another book fell out, and I looked at it, and it said "Flying Saucers from Outer Space" by Major Donald Kehoe, and I didn't. I thought it was science fiction or something, and I was pretty young to even know what science fiction was. But I looked at it; it was all I read through, and it was all these solid reports from professional observers and from the military and military pilots and commercial pilots and other professional observers. So that got my interest, and so then my family eventually moved to a little town in California called Palo Alto, and I kept up my research there and joined the National Investigation Committee of Aerial Phenomena, founded by Kehoe. I joined it in like '62 and just stayed in the research all that time.
Wow. You over those years, you've met a lot of well-known names in the UFO alien lore. Can you share with us a couple of those names that you have a lot of respect for and that you've learned some very information, as well as what that information would be?
Yeah, I eventually I went to the first World UFO Congress, and that was in Tucson, put on by Colonel Wendell Stevens and Bob Brown. And to this day, Bob still puts on the UFO Congress once a year in Nevada. And so that's what there was media from all over the world showed up for that one, and there was some very unique people there. And the story with had not broken yet with Bob Lazar, John Lear, because that was in like '88, and their stories broke around '89 or so. So anyway, that's how I really started meeting more of the folks, and then I started in on the lecture circuit, and that's where I lectured with many of the names that people have heard in the field, and just kept it up. So I lectured with Colonel Corso, and I met with Bob Lazar twice, introduced to him at his house in Las Vegas through John Lear. John and I were friends for quite a while. I haven't talked to him in a long time. And then I was friends for 20 years with Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon.
Wow.
And Gordon Cooper and I were friends for close to 20 years also. So we'd have a lot of private conversations on things, but became very good friends with Bob Dean, and Bob was very true in everything he said. I was fortunate. It's not a name you've probably heard in the circles, but I ended up doing, as far as I know, it was the first commercial daily talk show on unusual subjects. It was we were on the air for 3.5 years, 5 days a week, and it was like a Charlie Rose show. And the woman I did the show with, she was and still is one of the most gifted aura readers, and she just downplays her abilities as a profiler, but she's way beyond that. But she was with the Pentagon and intel circles for 26 years, and so she was basically the driving force of the show, and she was considered one of the top 5 aura readers in the world by our intel agencies, and she's just amazing. And so through her, she can read the electromagnetic field around every living thing like a computer, and has been able to do that since she was like 5 years old. But she was found by the government in her late teens or very early 20s, working at an Air Force base, and then they sent her in for to fine tune her abilities. So it's not just our government that uses people like that, but they search out people like her.
And there's anything in particular that they used her for that you know of?
Well, she could she could when world leaders were getting together, the way I understand it, they would bring somebody like her in and she could tell if somebody was a double agent. She can instantly tell if somebody is not telling the truth. And now the Indians always spoke because they could see auras. They would say this person speaks with a forked tongue. And what they were referring to is when somebody's not telling the truth, their aura forks off to the right.
Wow.
So anytime she was sitting in the front row listening to, let's say, a UFO researcher that was maybe embellishing or totally lying, she could tell instantly.
That's incredible.
Yeah, she's the most amazing person, and I spent 30 years with her, so that the projects we were involved in were pretty amazing. It was like science fiction, you could say.
Did they ever use her for any form of alien contact at all?
As far as I know, the answer would be yes, but
Okay.
she's never said that in big circle of people. But as far as I would say, the answer would be true. Yes.
Okay. So the military, our government, has been using people with special abilities. Obviously, we all know about the remote viewing that they did in the 60s, is going into the 70s, and then the gateway analysis that was written up and studied over Bob Monroe that Army intelligence had submitted in 1983 regarding consciousness, out-of-body experiences, that there's a creator in other dimensions, and tapping into that. Are you familiar with any of the other dimensions that may have been discussed by some of these personnel regarding where some of these aliens are from at all?
Yes, and as you and I had briefly discussed just a little bit, there's a government, he was OSI agent that has come forward after his 30-year non-disclosure agreement with the Air Force has expired, and he's only gone publicly speaking in the last 4 months. I sat in the front row. He's been well known throughout different researchers and investigators for many years as a debunker and kind of a big thorn in our side, but he's now kind of turning a corner. What that means, I don't know. He is coming out with a book in he said a couple months or something, but he's an interesting individual. Is Richard Doty, D-O-T-Y is his name, and he had oversight on some security for Area 51 there in the early 80s. But he talks about the different races that our government's in contact with, and then he describes over 100 different species that allegedly have visited this planet, but they never made really contact with us. But as far as in contact with us, he has listed it's basically 5 species, and it's the same cast of characters, the Greys, the Pleiadians, the Nordics, like that. There was one species he describes that I'd never heard of before, sort of. I'd only heard there was one species that, and only one case in Brazil where allegedly they had attacked a human, some native or something, but it was not a well-known case, and so this was only the second time I've ever heard of this species that has attacked an individual.
It's fascinating. A lot of people know about the Greys. They know about the Nordics. Now, are the Pleiadians similar to the Nordics, or are they different?
Well, now that's an interesting question there. If you're lucky enough to have been able to work with somebody like I was all those years, and she can instantly tell from somebody's aura, electromagnetic field, if they're not from around here.
Okay.
So ironically, the first night I ever met her was Christmas night, 1990. I just come in off the trip, and one of the members of one of the wealthiest families in Carolina had been researching this subject for unknown things for 50 years. So he had incredible memory. He could remember everything he read, had an incredible library of research books. Like I kind of followed in his footsteps after he died. My house is just one giant research library of books of the unknown stuff. So she started, I didn't know a lot of this stuff. They started rattling off what their abilities were. He'd flown him in from all over the world for Christmas to be at his house. And so she told me she was an aura reader. I didn't know what that was at the time. My whole focus for years had been, the UFO subjects and such. So later the next day, we went out for lunch, and we're at a table with some researchers, and she looked over and she goes, "Oh my God, there's a Palladium." And I'm like, "What? Are you kidding me?" And so he had just waited for a table, and she said he senses somebody scanning him, has found him out, and he will sit down for just a minute and then tell the waitress he's leaving, which is exactly what he did. He got up and walked out, and I'm looking at him just focusing. He looked just like us. And then she starts describing, she was able to scan his aura enough to figure out what he was doing here. His family lives here. They're just monitoring us. And then later, years later, a general on my street, his best friend was Storm and Norman. They went to West Point together. And he invited me over for Scotch on the Rocks for a couple hours. He said, "I'll deny everything, no note-taking, no recording. I'll let you ask what you can. I'll say it's classified if I can't answer it." And so I went over there, and away I went. I had a list of questions, and he confirmed these entities, the ones that looked like us, like this individual did that day after Christmas, was he said they work with us in the Pentagon. They can walk right by. You'd never know. And in all the years I knew her, she only described one other that I'd had contact with as a passenger. And I remember the person exactly because she described he was wearing a turquoise kind of Western outfit, very unassuming. And of course, she was thousands of miles away. I was on the flight. She described the whole thing. That's her abilities. So as far as this general confirming all that, he, as far as one of the species, of course, Edgar Mitchell and Gordon Cooper confirmed all that too. But that's this talk of the reptilians and the eating people and the little children. I have never, and she has, if anybody would know, this person would know. And that has never been anything talked of in the equation of things. It's sad that those conspiracy theories have gone out there, because that, in my honest opinion of researching this in 62, that's just not happening.
Okay, that was a question that was going to come up regarding some of the reptilians.
Nope.
I know that I had met Lynn Buchanan. He didn't talk negatively in that aspect. He's a retired general from U.S. Army Intelligence, and went on to do controlled remote viewing after leaving the military. He had expressed to me that some of the reptilians are able to, using holograph or frequency vibration, look just like us, and walk around publicly as well, but also that there is a pheromone that they have, some type of scent or some type of chemical thing that is easily distinguished from them to humans, but it's just not public. Otherwise, people would go out there and start hunting some of these reptilians, or who knows what else would happen. This was something that he'd shared with me back in 2006. He did state that, I believe in the 80s, based on original agreements they had with some of the aliens, whether it's the Greys or Reptilians, that they were allowed to do abductions as long as they returned people. And I guess the military, whatever, wanted a list of all the people they'd have abducted and stuff like that. Unfortunately, the aliens didn't keep up with their bargain. And there was a crash that happened. It might have been in, if I can remember correctly, it was either in Albuquerque or New Mexico or somewhere, that occurred in the 80s. And in the crash, from the recovery, they found a lot of human body parts. And after that, there was an agreement to cut off some type of relations that they had, I guess, with that particular species, because they had broken the agreement of returning certain individuals. That was a shocking revelation. And the question always was it really human body parts or just clone parts? Don't know. Have you heard about, obviously, being in the field, you've heard of some of the meetings and the agreements that they've had with previous presidents, I think going back to, the 50s, that they had met with the Greys or some of the species, the Nordics?
Yeah. Those agreements definitely took place. And I've had more than one person that would probably know what took place there and what happened. Now, what's going on with the two of my friends are probably the last remaining hypnotherapists that can be trusted as far as the best as doing hypnotic regressions of people have been abducted. But unfortunately for them, financially, because that's how they make their living, the business is dried up. It's like
Right.
the abductions have stopped definitely in about the last 2 years or so. Now, the two main countries that had the agreement with these beings were obviously the United States and then Australia. And so when I've lectured, myself and Wendell Stevens at the time were the only ones who had, as researchers, had been invited to lecture in China. He did it maybe probably 15 years before me, and then I got invited over by the Academy of Science and then lectured in Beijing, Hong Kong, and Shanghai. And one individual came up. I could tell he was just embellishing and wasn't really, some people want to hopefully tell their story and get invited to a conference somewhere. But I'd seen it many times before in different countries, and their events really didn't happen. But when I did go to Australia, to the place that's even more secret, per se, than 51 or S4, is called Pine Gap. And that's out at Alice Springs. I spent 3 weeks out there, and I went to the local paper. Do you have any stories you've done? And I'm a researcher, and showed him some credentials to show I was a legit guy or whatever. And he went back to the office, comes out with this 2 stacks of all these articles they'd done on kangaroo hunters, long haul truckers, all at missing time, been abducted, and kangaroo hunters seeing these craft come out of these openings in the desert, totally silent, bluish green, oval shape. But Pine Gap is much more secret. It's as far as I know, it's still shoot to kill. Where 51, they have the right to detain you without legal representation for hours. But Pine Gap is a whole different ballgame. Now, what's unique about these places is, like, Pine Gap is guarded by Australian military, but it's all intel agencies, hundreds and hundreds of them, underground facilities there. But it's Aboriginal land, so they worked out an agreement. So it's not under the Constitution of Parliament of Australia. Same thing with 51 is an Indian reservation, so it's not under our Constitution. And so was Dulce. The New Mexico base is a Apache Indian reservation, so it's not under our Constitution either. So it's very smart how they've designed these, installations like that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I remember years ago, I had spoken to Linda Bradshaw, who owned the Bradshaw Ranch, and she had done a book with Tom Dongo regarding merging dimensions. They believe there was alien bases underneath the land, and then eventually, if my memory is correct, from what had happened was the military government took over that property because of all the sightings and the aliens that had appeared and were going on. So they bought up that land from them. I remember there was a photograph in the book that I noticed right away in the darkness, an alien gray. So I brought it into Photoshop and I lightened it up, and there it was. And, you know, it was hidden because it was dark, and then you just lighten it up in Photoshop, and there's this alien gray in the background, which I believed her story about that property and the history behind it. It seems, you know, from what you're saying and what we've seen with a lot of UFO lore, is that there are underground bases in various parts of the planet, as well as underground bases under the ocean, that these beings have resided at, as well as possibly on the moon. Can you confirm that?
That was a question I brought up with the general that let me ask questions, and other people that would probably know the answer to that, and you know, hands down, they said there's this one race, and they're the equivalent. The ones that crashed in Roswell were like cousins of the ones that ended up working out the agreements. They're from a dying planetary system. And you literally, people say that's impossible. 35 light years from here, you know, you've heard the where they're from is Zeta Reticuli, allegedly.
Right.
And you've got to throw out Einstein's theory, or it's not absolutely impossible. But they, from what the general said, and the other two astronauts I knew, they get here roughly 35 light years in about 3 months. And the whole concept of time is nothing like mankind has invented, as you know, with the wormhole thing or whatever you want to call it. They're here. They need to live here, and there's thousands of them allegedly from these scientists and people that would know that I've met with have confirmed they are living in underground facilities and underwater, and have been for quite a while. But they literally, for this evidently they need to live here for whatever reason. I've heard rumors it's water. They need our water or something. Thought that maybe they can convert all our salt water into fresh. I don't know, but they definitely need to live here and live amongst us. And that's part of what the cloning process, the abductions were about. Now, the abductions, from what I understand, we got the agreements with Eisenhower and some other folks, and it was the number was 1,200. But what we gave them, from what I understand, was from people from mental institutions, and they were considered by these entities to be that was contaminated. They need perfection to try to clone to live amongst us, and so they felt, I guess, the way I understand it, a bit betrayed, and so then they just started abducting who they wanted. To try to perfect this cloning process. So that's how a lot of these things. Well, if you knew where I was getting a lot of this information, it's you'd have to take it to the bank. But the point is, and I've done a couple lectures where I was wired up to a voice stress analyzer under government specs. I said, if I'm lying, I'm dying. The light turns red, I'm not telling the truth here. And you got to. When you're putting out information that you know is absolute truth, as best of your ability, where I'm amazed at some of these researchers that come up with a lot of far out stories, and you'd like to believe them, maybe be a good plot for sci-fi movies, but they're never hooked up to any device. Now you can always fool a lie detector. FBI agents and other agents know you take Valium and you can pass any lie detector test, but you can't get through sodium pentothal or a voice stress analyzer with 99.9% government specs working. And these people never hook up with that stuff. I went and did it, and nobody's ever hassled me with my information. but that's how it is.
You know, when we take a look at the moon, and I understand that you've met Edgar Mitchell, astronaut?
Yeah, I know him for 20 years, yeah.
Okay. How do I ask this question? Did we legitimately go to the moon and land on the moon?
I have no doubt we did.
Okay.
I
When we
must say I
went,
was a co-producer on that show, Aliens on the Dark Side of the Moon, but we even
okay.
had Edgar and Buzz Aldrin on the show.
When they went to the moon, they came in contact with something else, didn't they?
He never. I stayed at his house twice. The time I knew him, Edgar, and the one thing I was surprised in is he called his house the museum. It was all the history of his life, career at NASA in the military, but he didn't have hardly 3 books on the UFO subject. I was surprised because he was lecturing all over the world on this, and I was with him when he did that press conference at the National Press Club, and you can see his interview right on YouTube. He looked right in the camera and he says, for 50 years at that time, might have been 70. Let's see. Anyway, he said that your government and many others have been lying to you. They've been in contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. And I'm standing there and I'm, because I didn't know what he was going to say. And you could have heard a pin drop. And not one major newspaper did an article on it the next day. The only one was New York Post with a cartoon says, moonwalking astronaut believes in little green men. And then Rush Limbaugh did a joke, a little few sentences about the comments. None of the major media followed through with his lecture. I couldn't believe it.
You know, it's interesting. In the 90s, Jim Lovell, who was the astronaut, was the command module pilot of Apollo 8. He spoke. He had a book that was coming out, and he spoke at the newspaper that I worked for. And one of the sales reps, we couldn't believe it because we gasped like, oh my God, Kim, she had the balls to ask this. But she says, do you believe in UFOs? And he said, no. And then he looked at the room. He paused. He goes, let's rephrase the question. He goes, you asked if I believe in unidentified flying objects. Everything has been identified.
Yeah.
And then everybody just kind of looked at each other. Well, what the heck does that mean? He goes, we'd be a fool to think that we are the only ones out there. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, once I bought a letter that he had, it was just a short letter he had written, and many times he signed after his name with the symbol of infinity.
That's crazy you say that, Jim. That's crazy you say that, and I want you to continue saying that. Is yesterday I was driving in my car. And I just said to the universe, I said, what's the next sign? And I turn, and on the side of a truck is the infinity symbol, and above it says infinity. And I said, okay, infinity. Well, what does that mean? Well, we all know everything's connected and everything goes on and on and on with life and multiverse. So I just kept driving. But right now, you're saying infinity. Why?
That was just, I thought it was a unique symbol for him to put right after his name on this letter. So I never met him. I did meet all the other astronauts, the original 7, except for the one that became a senator and stuff. The other guys didn't quite get along with him. He was like a, goody two-shoe type thing. But I got to meet the other guys, and they were a very interesting group. Obviously, they'd have to be to do what they did. But it was interesting with Edgar for his nickname at NASA was the Brain. He had an IQ of 190. He was the smartest astronaut at the time that they'd ever hired. And he was the one who was the main designer of the moon lander. And he was basically the check pilot that trained the other Apollo guys on landing the moon lander. He designed much of the navigation system and all that. He was an amazing individual. And so of all places where he was born and raised, Roswell, New Mexico.
Wow.
And his father's ranch was, I believe he said, 2 or 3 ranches from where the event happened. And he knew he always confirmed that Roswell did happen. Now,
Right.
another individual that I learned to fly was a World War II hero, and my dad died when I was 14, and this man took me under his wing, and he was one of the first 100 pilots of America to be in World War II for the United States, because he lied about his age and went over across the border to Canada and got in with the Royal Air Force. And he was commander of Eagle Squadron by the time he was like 20 years old. And some Air Force generals from the Air Force Academy, wrote about him later. His name was Colonel Gover. But all he ever told me all those years, almost 38 years I knew him, I used to chase these, get solid radar contact over white sands like that. But on his deathbed, I brought him Colonel Corso's book the day after Roswell. He was in a hospice, and I said, Colonel, have you ever, if you have time, could you read this book and tell me what your thoughts are about this? Because we've never really discussed it. And he read the book, and it was only like maybe 5 days from his death. And he said, we've never talked about this before. I did spend time at Roswell. I was in the original Army Air Corps, because strange things happened 90 days after the alleged Roswell event. The United States Air Force was formed. The United Nations was formed. NSA,
Wow.
Spielberg was born. It was pretty strange things happened. In technology advancements started like 90 days after the alleged Roswell. So he said, all I know when I was there was we didn't know where they were from, what their full technological capabilities were at the time, or their full psychological makeup. And he said only one of them had sex organs. And they looked, at that time, he just confirmed only one had, three had lived, and then they died within a short time, like about a week, and one lived for about 3 years and was taken to Alamogordo.
I think that was EB number one.
Right.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. So here's a man, never had kids, never had a family, a fighter pilot, saying this on his deathbed, another deathbed statement, and confirming the whole thing.
That's incredible. So he was familiar with the Foreign Technologies Division that took all this and had major corporations back engineer all the equipment that was recovered from the crash.
Now I'll be as honest as I can. He read the book. He knew about the entities and Roswell happened, that type of thing. But he said, I never knew what they did with the technology once it was transferred. That's he only would say with what he knew for sure.
Yeah, Corso, I guess, was involved with that and other individuals, and taking that stuff that had sat around for over a decade in boxes, not knowing what to do with it, and went to DuPont.
I lectured with Corso at different countries, and he never, ever changed his story. It was basically the same interview from day one, and my friend who could see, the electromagnetic field said he was telling the absolute truth, which I could tell anyway. So I've been very fortunate to have worked with somebody who had that capability and was one of the most incredibly gifted individuals. There's psychics out there. The first one I ever met was somebody showed me they could predict the future in 1970. Would have been 1973, I think it was. And I went to this guy's house because I got hired as an airline pilot, and the president came in. You guys just got hired at the most perfect time. We just bought a fleet of brand new 727s. We're expanding. The airline was owned by Howard Hughes. And so we did our training with the flight attendants that first week of INDOC. And the instructor had met this guy that was somewhat gifted about saying stuff that happened. So she said, if you want to just have a fun time, here's his phone number if anybody's curious. So myself and this flight attendant went to see him at an appointment just for grins. And he answers it was in Menlo Park, California. And he answers the door and he invites us in. He says right away, well, I can tell you both. We were just called anonymous, And he says, I can tell you both make your living in the sky. I'm sorry to tell you, this was a Friday. He said, when you go back to work Monday, you're going to lose your jobs. And I thought, I want my money back. And the president of the company just said, well, perfect time, just bought these brand new jets. Over the weekend, the oil embargo happened. And we come back to class. Oh, and then he goes, he looks at me, he says, you're going to lose your job, but don't worry, you're going to find a job in a very, very far away place you've never heard of, very hot and dry, but you'll find a job flying. And then he looked at her and he knew she was engaged to some rich guy. And he says, I'm sorry, I know you've been involved with a man and probably engaged to him for several years. And you're going to find out in a couple of weeks that he's seeing someone else. So once again, I go, I want my money back. You know, I know that's not happening with her. And she thought the same thing. So we come back in Monday. President walks in with the company attorneys and says, I don't know if you've been following the news this weekend. This oil embargo has started, and we've had to cancel our orders for our aircraft. And we're having to lay you all off. We're going to give you 2 weeks free passes to find work somewhere. So within 2 weeks, I had gotten an offer to fly a 707 in Dubai.
Wow.
United, never heard of the place. I'm sitting out there in the desert by this jet going, holy Toledo, this guy how did he do that? And then she caught her fiance with another woman. That was over. And so I went to try to find the guy again. By the time I got back in the country and he'd gone, I didn't see him for 20 years. And the man's name and where he was living right next to was Stanford Research Institute. And his name was Ingo Swann.
Oh, wow. I know who that is. Yeah.
And he was considered the #1 remote viewer in the world and had just started forming the remote viewers task force for the CIA. Wow. And he was doing these little readings on the side. And so, but he was the first person that ever proved to me the future somehow exists and people, the real ones, not the phony balonies. So many people have the gift. They don't know it or they misuse it and rip people off. But here's was the first time I ever got proof of an honest person, and definitely somehow out there the future does exist. And he proved it.
I used to remember listening to him many times on Art Bell back in the 90s with some fascinating stuff. He talked about time and aliens and everything else. And I was always intrigued whenever he came on the program.
Yeah, I ran into him 20 years later in New York. A friend of mine introduced me, and I said, oh, my God, it's you. We met years ago. You predicted my future. And then we became friends and stayed friends for about 15 years before he died. And he invited me over to his apartment there in New York. And he had remote viewed in 20 years in the future where to buy some rundown apartment house you could afford that would be worth a lot of money. And he bought this 5-story building, and that's where he got all his paintings on the bottom and wrote his books, and it became worth millions from remote viewing in the future.
You know, I was going to ask you to see if he was still alive, but you pretty much answered that. I did a quick research while we were talking here, and I find this interesting, and I obviously on my own I'm going to pursue this even more, but I looked at the infinity symbol that you were saying Jim Lovell would sign, and it says, infinity, the concept of something that is unlimited, endless, without bound. The common symbol for infinity was invented by the English mathematician John Wallis in 1655. 3 main types of infinity may be distinguished: the mathematical, the physical, and the metaphysical. It says the infinity symbol holds a deep meaning for spirituality, love, beauty, and power in a world filled with distraction and complications. The infinity symbol represents a sense of simplicity and balance. It reminds us to be conscious of where we are and the endless possibilities we have before us.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if he signed with that symbol every time, but the person I bought he was an autograph dealer out of Beverly Hills, so he was. Spielberg and many other people bought books of true nature and value from him, and especially signed things. I only was able to get one signed letter from Nikola Tesla. Tesla is a whole other story. Now,
Wow.
one of the experts of Tesla was Gordon Cooper after he got out of NASA. A lot of them worked for a short time for CIA, and then he got on, was one of the heads of the research development for Epcot for Disney, and he used a lot of Tesla technology at Epcot, and they ended up having to take it down. Or not use it, and so a lot of his stuff that they don't want you to be aware of is at the Smithsonian. That's behind the curtains there. That Tesla's not
Wow.
somebody they really like you're thinking about, because they, even the only two good documentaries were done by PBS, The Man Who Created Lightly, and one other. And they know, I mean, he was adopted from a minister and his wife, but they pretty much know who Tesla was. And even on the bio, he said, on PBS, he said he got much of his information from extraterrestrials. So, but there's not a whole lot written throughout the years in textbooks about him. I know people think Tesla the car, Tesla the rock band, but
right.
We wouldn't have the world we have today without the inventions of Nikola Tesla, alternating current especially. But he eventually got credit for inventing the radio, television, radar. Even a lot of pictures are with him and Einstein.
Right.
The guy, it's just so sad how he ended up, broke, and
No, I know.
could have been the richest man in the world. But the only movie, the major picture, like you and I discussed earlier, was made overseas by his country and nearest country in Serbia. But I finally got Blockbuster to put it on video, and they put it as science fiction over in America, and it only stayed on their shelves 6 months, and they pulled it. But it was never a big picture movie about him, and there really should be. If we have time, I know I shared it with our friend Johnny, but somebody very, very high up in the intel field, let's say, gave me a concise, I narrowed it down and transcribed it. It's like 3 pages of basically the history in modern times of this whole ET UFO subject, if you could allow me the time.
Yes, please.
So it starts out, this was transcribed there in 2001, but in 1928, there were many mass sightings in different parts of the world. The first known crash of a craft from another world in modern times occurred in Germany in 1933. The Germans were experimenting with Tesla technology regarding artificial lightning. They were trying to harness or trap electricity. This experiment caused an interference on the electromagnetic grid. It changed the electromagnetic energy at that time and place in which a UFO was entrapped within the energy field. This happened March 28, 1933, in a small town near Liedstadt, Germany. This craft was a probe and had no crew on board. It was a remote-controlled vehicle engaged in scientific research. It was later learned by scientists that it was gathering information about atmosphere pressures and energies influencing this planet. Very seldom are these types of craft mentioned, or evidence or information known about these vessels. There has been much more interest in Roswell, Corona, and other possible crash retrievals. Years later, this craft was found to be from a place never heard of before. In fact, the scientists found to be more of a time sequence than a place. The Germans tried to duplicate it through back engineering. When Hitler's soldiers first found it, the craft was taken to a holding tank facility in a small town called Mecklenburg. It was later soon moved to another location, examined, and found to not be from the mind of man. At first, it was thought it could possibly be from Russia, the British, or even the Americans. However, there seemed to be such an advance possible to conceive that anyone had such advanced form of technology, and for that technology to not have interfered or intervened in the wars previously. The Germans never retrieved any alien bodies. This retrieval was the first solid evidence in modern times that there was life beyond Earth. Then, the year of 1942 was the first UFO retrieval that had life forms on board. It was retrieved by the United States military near Alamogordo, New Mexico, mid-December. This craft crashed also due to the shifting of the electromagnetic grid in the area. The grid shifted due to the testings of bombs in the area. Civilians first discovered the craft while setting up a large Christmas tree on a ridge overlooking the town. The beings were still alive after the crash. The witnesses said they looked like little children. These beings escaped before the military arrived. The craft was taken to an area near White Sands, New Mexico. They also thought it might be a secret weapon from Germany. This craft was more of an elliptical shape. The craft was transferred sometime later after the Roswell crash, although the craft was not the same. There was thought to be an association. It was only later, with the technology that came from Roswell, that the opportunity to do some invasive research on that, which was discovered in 1942. The research confirmed it was from another world. The Roswell crash occurred because the bombing experiments in New Mexico also affected the electromagnetic grid. The radar was picking up the fluctuations on their scopes more like static electricity. This was enhanced by the electrical storm that night. The grid in the area had been warped or put in a pattern of a wave which allowed for the craft not to be able to traverse in a stabilized way. There were not two craft, as many believed. A part of the craft containing a crew crashed into a ridge. There were 5 survivors. Of those that were taken, 3 died immediately after being transferred, 2 stabilized. The 2 were separated, in which one died later and the other one maintained a life existence. One was taken to a facility near Alamogordo, New Mexico. The one that died later was taken elsewhere. The medical staff caused it to be over-oxygenated, and it died. When they died, their color changed from a bluish-gray skin texture to that of a lavender or purple color. The last one lived 3.5 years. There were rumors it had lived 6. Those rumors were inaccurate. The being lived much in a normal atmosphere, a normal Earth environment. They learned not to over-oxygenate it. He told our scientists that many planets have life and have atmosphere close to their surface that life can survive. The extraterrestrial can survive in our atmosphere unrestricted and unassisted. So what did they learn from this entity? The scientists learned these beings had integrity and compassion, an element of relationship to all life, an element of intelligence that seemed to be far superior to that of humans, especially that in which would be called alchemy, astronomy, and understanding the obvious differences and evolution of the human body. Our scientists learned to realize how much the atmosphere of Earth played in such an extrinsic part in the development of the shape and necessity of the human body. That is the area that doctors in biology and anthropology found the greatest resource of information from this entity because of the physical properties of the structure of the alien bodies and the difference of the human bodies. It was elaborated on by the scientists of the need for or lack of certain physical attributes of the alien bodies. There was a lack of vocal cords, but there was direct and purposeful communication. This was done through telepathy. They could send and receive thought anywhere. Life is of the same energy. It was said to them that there is a law of existence that is far higher than the understanding of the human mind. The greater dialogue with this being from another world was such that there was a spiritual integrity and enough upliftment from those who encountered an exchange and understanding that allowed the humans to feel really embellished, to feel immature in their thinking. This being was used to communicate messages to his race, which was accomplished. This dialogue with others from the aliens world began in 1949. The beings of Roswell were not the beings that are involved in human experiments now, which are presently viewed as alien abductions. It could be best understood. They say they were cousins of these beings, putting it in human terms. These beings were of a similar association, but from a different planet than the ones we call the Zetas. In 1952, meetings and treaties were arranged by the first group of beings associated with the Roswell crash. These treaties were worked out from 1952 through 1954. They allowed for an exchange of technology for scientific research to be done on humans to help save the Zeta species. The treaties allowed for underground facilities to be built in the southwestern states in Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah. A subcommittee was formed in 1954 called MJ-12 to oversee the details of the treaties. General LeMay and a scientist LaForge were highly involved putting these treaties together. For those who worked in equal association with these beings, there were great benefits of new understanding and knowledge. The experiments are done with the biological clones called the Greys, not so much the Zetas themselves. The understanding was so the humans would not remember the experience in their consciousness. This was done so that they would not express it to others, in which to cause great panic or dismay amongst mankind on Earth. The secrets that still reside over UFOs and beings from other worlds are greatly misunderstood, even after all these years. No matter if you're Catholic, Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, spiritualist, Mormon, or many other religions, they may separate our common views. No matter what nationality or race of the world, the one concept we will all share in common soon is the knowledge we are not alone. There is life seen and unseen throughout the universe, and we are all connected with it through thought and energy that never dies. An energy that is an infinite state of self-expression. This life on Earth is only one school of many throughout the universe.
That's incredible. Now, where did this come from?
This came from as high of intel as I was able to be connected with. Let's say, if anybody would know, they would know.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's just phenomenal. And I'm going back throughout history while you're telling some of it I'd never heard of before, and some of it I was very familiar with. And you said something that is that resonated with me. I won't go into details, but let's just say there was an experience where I had an experience, and the information from that experience was that intelligence and knowledge is this all-knowingness, that everything is connected. All living life forms are to be respected and appreciated, and a unity and proper balance. And it had to do with understanding not only we're not alone in the universe, but also even the species we have on this planet, the animals, plant life, and everything is to be respected and to be treated as equal. And that message was very powerful, and said that certain humans that reach that understanding and that intelligence tend to be awakened and connected with other beings from other planets and other dimensions.
Yes.
Interesting.
No question. Yeah. And the concept, which one thing is kind of unique is that many researchers I've met through the years, and later on, as I get to know them through the years, we talk about how we were raised religiously. And I would say 70% we were all raised by the same religion, which was the first religion created by a woman in America, and was the first, if not the biggest, metaphysical religion, if not the United States, the world maybe. I don't know. I didn't know much about it. My dad died at a young age, and so they get our religion confused with Scientology, which is kind of sad, but in a way. But that's a whole nother religion. But I was raised, and many other researchers, by Christian Science, which is
right.
We heal through prayer, and we didn't believe in doctors, but it was metaphysical concepts, because Mary Baker Eddy, who created the religion, was basically channeling. And some people don't even, channeling is a whole nother concept.
Right.
I've studied that, and our governments, the world have studied it, and there's so many phony balonies, but and some of them they deserve Oscars. They've memorized their scripts very well, but when you deal with the real remote viewers and the real channelers, where you can ask them almost any question instantaneously, they have an answer, then you've got the real deal. And I was able to work with several of those types for many years. So it's been a real eye-opener as far as that goes. Now, another unique event that took that night, Christmas night, when I met this person I ended up doing the show with, was another woman, and she's walking out the door with her husband, and she said, I'm sorry we didn't get to meet. Do you have a card or anything? And I said, yeah. And this was back when there was no internet. This was 1990. Mm-hmm. So she said, well, I think your mother would like to give you a message. And I said, well, my mother died 22 years ago. I'm sorry. You must be mistaken. And she says, no, my son, there is no death. So 3 days later, I get the manila envelope in my mail. I'm opening at night in my hotel room on the layover, and here's this 6-page letter from my mother. And I'm like, I never got to say goodbye to her. Never even knew she was sick. She died of breast cancer, but didn't tell anybody because they didn't believe in doctors. So I cried like a baby. I've got the whole letter. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the part I did want to share is, because she calls me by my nickname that only she did, and all this remember the time we did this and that. But this is the part that's important to hear. In one of the pages is, yes, I miss our times together, and yet you have to know I truly am continually with you in spirit. Look to the stars and envision my traveling the universe for it is so wonderful to be free from my body. The peace and serenity are indescribable where I am, and one should surely cry upon a child's birth, for the world they are leaving behind is truly magnificent compared to that world where they will be residing. As your father, we see each other often. However, he is still pursuing other interests I could care less about, which was the way he was. He had many faults in my eyes, and we didn't always agree on many things, for he was strong and bullheaded at times, exactly the way he was. He ruled the house with an iron fist, but underneath his toughness, he had a soft heart. In heaven, relationships are different than those on earth. Man communicates in thought, and there is so much more harmony on some planet. Again, it depends on your soul's evolutionary level where you go after you leave your body, as to where you reside even here. But love is evolutionary and different in God's kingdom. One is continually going to school to learn, because there are numerous thousands, millions of experiments being conducted on planets throughout many universes, galaxies, and as we are all part of them. While some of us are what you would call specimens, others are educated to be the leaders and teachers, even in heaven. There are also numerous vocations to be pursued, but the technology is of a far superior nature than you are exposed to on Earth. Earth is truly a babe in the woods compared to other creations where life abounds. So here's this woman, she never knew me. Like I said, there was no way, there was no Google, anything. And here's this amazing 6-page letter. And the ironic thing, years later, I found out she has the exact birthday as my friend that I ended up doing the TV show with.
Wow.
And I called her. I said, how did you do this? She says, I've had the ability, and my grandmother had it, and my one daughter and my brother, and I hear the voices, and I go to my typewriter. She didn't even have a computer thing. I heard your mother come through at 4:32 in the morning. I go and I type what I hear onto my typewriter, and then I send it to you.
Wow. Yeah, just the channeling of that all information that just flows through. You know, I've been involved with ITC, instrumental transcommunication,
Yeah, sure.
EVP, since I was, since 1976, 77, I was a little kid. And I had my first reel-to-reel player, which my dad bought me. Well, when my dad got sick, 2004, he had a stroke and a heart attack, and then he was 5 years in a care center as his body deteriorated. We talked about life after death. We talked about the hauntings and stuff that went on in the house. And I told him about what I do, you know, my passion and what I'm following and researching in this world. And I explained to him how consciousness works. And I share with him near-death experiences, how consciousness works, and how he can use that consciousness to communicate with me. Sure enough, when he passed away in July of 2009, he appeared that day. Not only that, he caused things to happen in the emergency room that the chaplain and the staff witnessed, which was like a poltergeist activity. But once one of these devices was created, the spirit box, and introduced later that year, he came through in the spirit box. I have recordings of his voice from the other side. So my life has been fascinated by spirit communication using various technology that we can actually hear them talking to us, and we can record it and play it back, and there's that person talking to us. Sometimes it's in their voice, or you can see the voice changing through various frequencies as they're projecting their thoughts to us. So it's just fascinating to me how in the afterlife they can communicate to us through various methods, whether it's channeling through somebody else, or even giving us messages and signs, music, TV, billboards, things that pop up in front of you. And we have that type of connection. It's very similar to what I've studied and I've seen regarding the alien presence. You know, they have obviously the tracking, the implants and stuff for certain abductees, but then also they, like you even said earlier, they use telepathy, their thought transference. Now, I've read and heard that they're fascinated with human beings and how we are able to psychically pick up stuff and communicate through greater distances. And I don't know if it was because greater distances of telepathy and thought transference than they have, but most abductees and experiences they have witnessed where the aliens are not even moving their voice. They're communicating with them with thought. Going back to what you said with prayer, how powerful prayer is, which is projection of thought into that dimension. What am I saying? Everything is thought in the universe.
Right.
Everything is consciousness. But our belief system, our education teaches us to be in this paradigm of just this time and space, limited, that our thoughts exist within the brain, which psychology teaches, but then parapsychology is the study of projection of thought and everything outside the brain, which I know that obviously consciousness is not restricted to a mushy little organ.
Right. And it's another individual that I got to be friends with for 20 years, and I was introduced to him from the same person that had this meeting that Christmas night. And it's kind of ironic, I almost died Christmas night 10 years ago. My sister died Christmas night in 1994. And here the night Christmas when I met all these amazing people, and another individual, he was the first person that proved he could read minds. And later I had him I flew him out many times to my house on the East Coast, and there were 3 books written about him. He claimed he was from the planet Clarion. Eventually, I had to interview with him. He could have heard the jaws drop on the table with all these researchers when he said that, but he demonstrated things that definitely proved he had just amazing abilities. Unfortunately, if you go check his name out, there's only one person that describes him and said he was a total phony, baloney, and this and that. And it's just sad that one person can destroy the memories of somebody like this on that. I don't know if it's called not IDB, but when a encyclopedia or something like that.
Oh wait, you're talking about IMDb, like International Database of.
No, that's different. This was Wikipedia.
Okay.
And you pull up his name. You think it's the end all, the be all of information for somebody, that this has to be credible.
Yeah,
everything that this one individual is the only one who commented on this amazing person, but says all this crap. But his name was Olaf Johnson, JonSSON, and there's one book, Psychic Feats of Olaf Johnson. There were 2 others. He found buried treasure for people all over the world that were well-known cases. Found all the buried Japanese treasure from World War II for Marcos. And Marcos promised him 10%. He could sense when he was over there, Marco was lying, and the car picking him up had a bomb under it. So he snuck out the back of the hotel onto a freighter back to the States, and the car blew up. And but that's how Marcos got so wealthy, was from the buried gold found by Olaf Johnson. He found Mel Fisher's gold and proof of that. So it's an interesting book, but the things I saw Olaf be able to do with levitation and thought process, he had the world's record, the highest tested ESP returns in the world from the company that confirms these things. But he and I became good friends, and it was just amazing to work with him and my other friend that I worked with 30 years, but that did the show and demonstrated how this is, row your boat. Life is but a dream. All this is, as you and I know, this is just a classroom. And when you leave your physical body, your energy doesn't die, your personality goes on. And if you want proof of that, check out, he unfortunately just died last year, but 3 of the best mediums I ever saw, because there's so many phonies, but was Reverend Reed Brown out of Washington, D.C. with his Metaphysical Chapel. Amazing. And the only time he ever allowed an interview and it never aired was by Walter Cronkite, called In Search of the Paranormal, and they pulled it. But he's still alive, but he's the best I've ever seen. Reverend Reed Brown, and then Luis Gasparetto, who could channel in those 44 artists and do an exact painting with just his hands and his eyes closed in 5 minutes.
Yep.
Rembrandt.
Incredible.
Yeah, and he just passed away. I only got to meet him twice and watch him do the whole thing in 5 minutes with a painting. It was just phenomenal. He gave all the money to charity, and the exact signature of the original artist upside down in two hands or with his feet. And only one video was ever done.
Was he the one that was on that documentary many years ago with Telly Savalas?
Yes, that was the only one. I was just going to say.
Oh, my God.
The director or producer was related somehow to Telly, and that's how Telly did the show. And the last 15 minutes, the tape is called UFOs and Channeling. Came out in 1992, I believe. And it was never put on DVD, only VHS, and you can buy copies of it still on eBay. I've got like 6 of them.
I watched it many times. Yep.
And it's on YouTube. The whole thing's on YouTube. Watch that last 15 minutes of Luis Gasparetto.
Incredible.
If he wasn't proof of life after death, watching, he did, all the top artists.
He was channeling all the masters, the top artists, Picasso, Rembrandt, Van Gogh.
Yes.
He was allowing them to go through his body. They would take turns, and they would paint blindfolded in the dark with his feet, with his hands.
In 5 minutes.
Art historians,
he had a whole you see his paintings done. It was like, and I mean, he'd have about 1,500 people come watch him. He'd come into America from Brazil once a year, and he had a little museum in L.A., which he shut down later. But to watch him live do what he did, if he wasn't proof that your body may die, but your energy never dies, your personality lives on.
Yeah, it's just fascinating.
Yes.
And then there's art historians, and curators that went and reviewed his work, and they were blown away. That's how somebody could do such different styles throughout history. Yes. And they believe, there was a gift, an ability this man had.
Yeah. I was really lucky to have gotten to meet him and watch him in person do his work, but that was a unique video to watch with some very unique channelers in there, but he was definitely the most unique. That UFOs and Channeling, you can see the whole thing on YouTube. And a lot of people don't realize that Pasadena Jet Propulsion Laboratories was created, the 3 founders, by them using a Ouija board.
Wow.
And they don't brag about that in the history of Jet Propulsion Laboratories, but if you dig deep, there it is. And our government has studied the whole concept, which is thousands of years old from the Egyptians, of Ouija boards and that whole contact from other dimensions or worlds like that.
There's it's all fascinating. We can go into some other realms regarding that. There's 2 things I want to go back to. The woman that read the auras and worked for the government, she's still alive?
Yes.
If possible in the future here, we'll keep in touch. I would like to meet her personally.
That's impossible.
Ooh, okay, well.
She won't even.
So much for that.
She hasn't met with me in 5 years now in person. I talk to her once a month, but I don't know what happened. But she won't meet with hardly anybody in person anymore.
All right. Well, then in the future, if maybe I can talk to her, set up a phone call or something.
That's possible. Yeah, I doubt she would do this type of show. But
no,
you never know.
not for an interview. I mean, personal, for stuff that I've experienced and I go through that she can probably shed some light on with the stuff that I do.
Sure.
The second thing is going back to when you talk about Richard Dottie, that talked about the 5 different alien species: Greys, Nordics, Pleiadians. We still have 2 other gaps. Do you know what the other 2 aliens were?
He put, I have his tape. He put it on the screen, and even he said, I don't know where the scientists came up with these terms. Only the first one was called, EB1 or EB, extraterrestrial biological entity. But after that, they weren't called Nordics or Pleiadians. He just described them. They're tall, blonde, with they couldn't walk amongst us because they looked so out of place. And then the ones that look like us, and then the reptilians, and then the species that he did his presentation on that had attacked this person out just off the perimeter of 51. And then he talked about F-16 shooting down a craft 51 ordered by Reagan, and then the little entities got out, and a rescue craft came and got them, and then they retrieved the craft and took it to S4, I guess.
Wow. I know Charles James Hall talked about the tall whites. I had read his book, Millennial Hospitality. What do you think about that?
Well, I'll just say no comment.
Okay. All right. That's fine. That's fine.
I have been so lucky to have people that could, see through the screen, you might say. And I got nothing against certain researchers and things, but I've been so privileged to be able to work with somebody who could tell right away if somebody wasn't being totally honest on stuff.
I understand. So when the Nordics when the Nordics talk about Orion, that's a star system, right?
Yeah, that's a whole nother story.
So they said that because when I had met Dolores Cannon back in '99 for a specific reason, it came up during a session that the Nordic had communicated directly to her Orion, and that everything comes from Orion or something. I would have to go look at the notes from so long ago. But Orion stood out as being something so important. Do you know why that is?
All I know is one of the species were from Orion, and there was a movie company. I don't believe, as far as I know, they're not in business anymore. But
Orion Pictures, I remember them. Yeah,
Orion Pictures, and they weren't doing well. There was something going on with using that name, and somebody from somewhere, let's say in a special place on the East Coast with a big white house, didn't want them around any longer using that name of the company because they didn't want the association. So I ended up being kind of a go-between, called the CEO and described to him certain things. He must have thought I was a nut job, but because he would not give up the name of the corporation. That's a big deal. Does have to switch to something else. But they not much longer after I talked to them about it, they ended up filing bankruptcy, and as far as I know, went out of business. So it was Orion's kind of this was way back. We're talking, mid '90s when that call took place. So this stuff gets pretty strange. There's somebody I've gotten to be friends with for quite a while, Bryce Zabel. He created that unique show called Dark Skies for NBC.
Oh, I love that show. Yeah, and then they pulled it.
And how he even got that show on the air, he and I have talked about that because I said, how did you ever get that show on the air? And he in fact, Spielberg was making another show and tried to actually stop that show from being produced. But the way Bryce got all the information was somebody that had connections high up in the government that relayed all this information.
Yeah, you could tell.
So what they did is they put in that gagloid little creature to make it look like it was science fiction, and that's how it got on the air for a year and a half. And then it was only released. They never re-aired the show. There weren't reruns, and finally, 25 years later, they finally released it out onto DVD, which they've never done until recently, and it's only per copy. You have to order it per copy from Amazon. Is called Intruders by Bud Hopkins' book, but that book was CBS television miniseries, 1994, and they're very, very well done. Stars Richard Crenna. I tell everybody that you can probably get a used copy of it for $10. Amazon per print is $20, but that is so well done, and it's basically based on Dr. John Mack's research on abductions tied in with Bud Hopkins' book. But there was I can't use his name, but the head of MJ12 was on the board of directors of CBS at the time, and he got that show greenlit to go on the air for whatever reason. So if you've never seen Intruders, please take a look. It's very well done, and that there's much more to why that miniseries got on the air than people realize.
Okay,
Now, there's several horror movies. Well, there's horror movies called Intruders. You want the one from CBS television starring Richard Crenna, not the other horror movie
Okay.
ones.
Okay. Okay. Do you think that there's going to be a release to the public about aliens, UFOs anytime soon?
Well, no, that's another interesting thing, not coming from me, but now Bryce Zabel and Richard Dolan wrote a book called AD, After Disclosure, a few years back. Very well written, in my opinion. I've tried to get Bryce and them, and I've some connections I had tried to get it made into a series or something, and it never got any traction. But the when Richard Doty gave his talk, it was ironically 3 days before the release of the Pentagon Papers, which ended up only being done by a committee of 2 people in the Pentagon. Really didn't, they were overwhelmed. But Doty claimed he was in touch with people at the Pentagon, and June 24th, allegedly, Congress and Senate were going to get the full briefing, because Doty talked about the secret space program that we have back engineered craft going throughout the universe of our own. They can't go interstellar because they don't have the proper minerals for that. And one way these ETs get here is a thing called inversion energy. It's a thought energy, and thought is so much more powerful than people really give it credit for. As we know, we use such a small percentage of our brain, but these entities are hundreds or thousands of years ahead of us, and they know how to use thought energy, and they use it for everything. So until we can get the minerals or the thought process of this inversion energy perfected, Doty, right in his talk, ex-OSI officer, admits we got this secret space program going on. I don't believe all the stuff I've heard about it, but some of it I'd heard for quite a while. We even talked about it on our show 30 years ago. So, the NASA doesn't like hearing about it because all this taxpayer money going, it's like a smokescreen, like a movie set of what's really going on out there.
Yeah. Now, in your life, you've seen UFOs, but have you ever seen an alien?
Have I ever? No, I have not. But
Okay.
I have seen. I've been interviewed on History Channel and Learning Channel and things like that on the craft that flew by my 737 3 different times.
Wow. My stepdad was a pilot for 30 years for Trans World Airlines, and I think he went to Continental just briefly, but he fought in the Korean War. He also did reconnaissance missions in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I have him on audio. I mean, he passed away last year, unfortunately, due to COVID. But I have him on a couple occasions talking about the Foo Fighters that they used to chase. They would be scrambled to go up and chase these Foo Fighters, and how they would move within like 100 miles within seconds. They'd be right above them, then they'd be completely out of distance, and then they'd be back. And they didn't know what they were at the time, whether it was Russian, German, or whatever, or Japanese. They were, they had no idea, but they knew that nobody on this planet could create something like that. After they had a couple encounters with them, they had multiple encounters with them. First couple times they thought it was something far advanced to our technology that another country had, but then they quickly realized that it was not. And he also had talked about a couple of the UFO sightings that they would not really talk about it. Control Tower says, "Do you want to report it?" And they'd say no, because they just don't want to be interrogated, and they want to go home after working these long hours.
Oh yeah, they worry about their retirement. It's a sad situation like that. But yeah, the Foo Fighters were definitely not from around here. The whole thing is amazing, even after the invention of the internet. Because at one time the only other one with more websites was websites about God. Second was UFOs, but and they, in a lot of ways, these entities and that are connected, because one of the reasons, there's several reasons why they work so hard to keep this covered up. It's not covered up very well, but there's about 50,000 websites on UFOs, and so any agents that kind of go rogue and try to put out what they know, because it's so compartmentalized. It's on a need-to-know basis. So not everybody has all the answers, not even the president, because they know he's only in there for a maximum of eight years anyway. The only one who was really the most brief was Eisenhower, and then Bush Sr., because he was head of the CIA before he became president. So it gets really unique how this all works. And it's basically, from what I've found, about a rough number of about 5,000 individuals worldwide, a lot of them in the control of the media. They could have never pulled this off for this long without complete cooperation and control with the media. And that's how they've done it. And you're talking about number one is religion. Close second is all about, oil and money, because these entities have conquered gravity. Once you conquer gravity, you've conquered everything. And that there goes your fossil fuel economy. There goes the world economies as we know it. Right. And these other processes, I know it's very sad and sickening in a way. These entities, when the ones that have been, dissected or whatever, they're, on the average, they're about 300 years old. So they've conquered diseases as we know it, and they have the cure for cancer and this and that, from what I understand. And we have people in the patent office that monitor inventions coming in, or trying to get a patent on a car that gets 3,000 miles per gallon or something, things like that, or cures for something that really works. And then these people are basically bought out, or if they don't want to sell their concept, give up their patent, and there's other ways it's dealt with, unfortunately. So there's some big reasons why this thing's, it's about a control thing, and I get it. That the one show that is amazing that's still on the air, they're grabbing at every little angle now because they've been on so long. It's Ancient Aliens, but they're by having that show on the air and allowed by the FCC to air, even though it's a cable channel, they put out a lot of information. So there goes, if they ever do have after disclosure, there goes the government's excuse, plausible denial. We didn't keep this from you. There was a show, Ancient Aliens, all about this.
Right, right.
So, and I would not be surprised in the least if the funding, one way or another, is funneled in from the East Coast to Hollywood to keep that show going. So it's really crazy how the media works with this. And when I testified in front of those congressmen and senators representing commercial pilots, the one book I brought is the Fire Officer's Guide to Disaster Control. It's a federal guide. It's only been 2 editions, and the second edition came out adding Chapter 13 on how to deal with dead aliens, UFO crashes, and that type of thing.
Wow. And I know Philip Corso had, for a period of time with Army Intelligence, they were doing recovery missions. They had a handbook, I think it was like 57 or so different species that they had identified up until that point.
I've never heard that number that much unless they're referring to, like Doty said, that have traversed, but he only confirmed for this group of 5. I don't know. Now, people always ask, why don't they land on the White House lawn or the LA freeway? What they could have proven they're real any time. So why not? And from what I understand, I know it sounds like Star Trek, and that's a whole nother deal with Gene Roddenberry, who created Star Trek. He was an airline pilot, and he was in 3 crashes and different airlines. And finally, he said, evidently, somebody's telling me something. Get out of this the airline business or flying. And he got out, and all of a sudden he preached. I don't know how all of a sudden it was, but get Star Trek going. And I've met with Shatner 2 or 3 times, and Shatner has a strong interest in this subject even before he started in Star Trek. So this stuff gets kind of strange, but they're supposedly, from what I understand from people that would probably know, there's some kind of federation universal law out there that they have to abide by, these entities, and they can't just they can't go against elected or the will of the people who elected the ones who got elected for their maintaining their leadership on this planet, and they can't
Correct.
just land on the White House lawn and know the chaos it would cause. So they have to leave it up for these people that are in leadership to decide when the time is right. If I had any idea,
our civilization has a purpose for the soul and the specific part of the soul to have experiences within this paradigm, and within that paradigm to complete it, it would be disrupted if outside sources, no different than the Nephilim and the Fallen, that had mixed with man through its awareness and affected its own spiritual growth. So it's kind of like you have an experiment, you're in a petri dish, and you don't want any contaminants to affect the result and the outcome of what it's supposed to happen within that petri dish. So that's kind of like what we're going on here. But I did want to ask you, because this popped into my head. I remember this conversation back in the 90s, I believe it was, but then also after 9/11. There was rumors that we went into Iraq originally, Desert Storm, and then obviously after 9/11 to find something, that Saddam or their government had either a Stargate or the Ark of the Covenant in their possession. Did you ever hear anything about that?
Just rumors, nothing substantiated, but I had heard about it. That's possible, but did the Ark exist? And obviously Spielberg believed in it somewhat. I think it did and does somewhere. I have no idea. One of the things that we created, and I'm surprised we haven't used it more, was the holographic imaging devices for the military, created by a firm in Southern California. And they created the Phoenix lights to test it out, and then they were going to, project it over wars like Jesus coming down or whatever, to maybe for Muhammad to affect the outcome of the war with these devices. They're very sophisticated devices, no question. I mean, they came out way back in the 90s with the Phoenix lights. Of course, a lot of people don't want to believe that, but years later, the company was named and this and that created this machine, and it's very sophisticated. And I would not believe, or not, I would think it would have been used in some wars, but I have never heard that it was. But as far as what you're asking, I'd only heard just mild rumors, nothing substantiated. That the Iraq War, in my opinion, that's just me, was all about oil.
Oil. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I that's what I would assume as well. It's interesting, whether people know this or not, but Iraq, what is known as Iraq today, originally was Sumerians. From what I understand, that all that land was the Sumerians. And so how historical and how old that location is just fascinating. And obviously,
definitely,
after,
the
oil and
everything. I'd love to go into the museum, wherever it is, with our government or others that have the hidden proof of stuff. But what can I say? It's been an interesting journey as it is on this stuff I never believed possible or believed in. I just was just a kid pulling a book off a shelf by accident, and if there is such a thing, which I totally believe in throughout my life, the weird things that have happened, I totally believe in synchronicity. Most things happen for a reason, even though you may be on the other side by the time you realize, oh, that's why that happened.
Right. No, it's just, to me, I mean, the alien and UFO topic I've always been fascinated by, which basically in the mid-90s, I became fascinated. I've seen several UFOs. I've had some extraordinary encounters. Two of the UFO sightings, well, actually three, but the one was the cigar craft, which just a couple years ago. where I live now, I witnessed when I was in my car, and I called my buddy who lives in the subdivision. I said, get outside and look. And he saw it with me. We watched it for 10 minutes. That was actually terrifying to see something like that so big move while we're watching it, but then start reacting to us, what we were talking about. It starts to cloak itself behind this cloud. Then it punches itself through a cloud, just like a pencil going through cotton candy, as if it was trying to show us something as we're talking about this, how it can cloak itself. And then the other one, obviously, with my girlfriend back in 99, seeing this UFO fly over us that was like yellow and red. It was huge, just massive. After we were just talking about that topic. But probably one of the most interesting was after a dinner with my stepdad, and during a conversation we had at dinner talking about aliens and UFOs, I decided to leave, drive home, and as I was pulling into my subdivision, I stopped because something caught my eye. And I looked up in the sky westbound towards Rockford, and I see this glowing egg-shaped object that is self-illuminating. It doesn't have the iridescent or translucent type of light that you see on planes or helicopters. This thing was internal, and the way it was moving horizontally like a magnet, very perfectly linear, I was just blown away. But then I noticed to the far left, upwards by a 90-degree angle, there started to become a rip in the sky, and it started spinning around kind of like a funnel. But inside it, it became like this magenta color, and I started witnessing a portal, basically a gateway. And I watched this thing as it got closer to it. It was well below it. It started to curve upwards to make a 90-degree turn, but it was curving to go towards this thing. Now it was going vertically up towards this hole that was opening up. As it got closer to this hole in the sky, you're seeing it illuminate inside the hole. And then you start seeing lightning bolts that are going on around it, and it turns from magenta to cyan and cyan to magenta, as if the electromagnetic field of this thing that it was going through was being affected by it now going through it. And I watched this thing in complete awe and was dumbfounded. And then when it closed up, it was gone. The sky was just black. So I had about 1 block left to go home. And I said, okay, what time is it? What time is it? I'm looking at my clock. It's 9:15. I said, I got to get in the house. I got to write this down before I forget it. Well, I get in the house, and that's a Friday night. I completely forget about it until Sunday morning. I remember waking up Sunday morning remembering, wait a minute, I had an experience Friday night. What the hell? And I jumped online, did research about wormholes, portals, and I saw some images that were very similar to what I saw, studied it, and then I went on Facebook and I wrote and I did a drawing of exactly what I saw, and I posted it on Facebook. So it's probably still on my old timeline on Facebook, what I witnessed. That to me was extraordinary to see. How come? Why did I see that? How was I able to see that? To see this egg-shaped craft glide across the sky very slowly and go into this portal. And to me, it was a revelation that, okay, they obviously, through time and space or other dimensions or other parts in the universe, will open up this wormhole. Are you familiar with any of these types of wormholes?
Only a little bit, but what's interesting, did you, and that's another argument people have, there's literally millions, hundreds of millions of portable phones with cameras, videos, and nobody seems to be getting many pictures of this stuff. Did you have any time to have videotape this?
Well, here's the thing. The cigar craft, I thought of that, but I wanted to get a witness because I was actually scared. I thought at first pulling over and filming this thing because it was so massive, but I was scared. And that fear that I started feeling watching this thing, I said, I got to call a friend of mine to witness with me because I was afraid I was going to get abducted if I went and did something like that. So I didn't. The portal of the thing, watching this thing at nighttime, the Apple iPhone going back 5 years or so was terrible filming at nighttime in the sky. I know that because I tried it once before. But when I witnessed this thing, when you're in such awe, you don't want to take your eyes off it. And this happened like within, I don't know, 15 seconds, So for me to go get my camera, turn it on, and then do this, I was afraid I was going to miss it because I didn't know if this thing was going to take off real quickly or whatever. So in those instances, sometimes you don't even think of it because you're in awe to what you're witnessing.
Yeah, but that is one of the arguments from all over the place. I know a friend of mine's a retired CNN anchor person, and but CNN gets UFO videos sent in a lot, and they never air them, but they keep them in a room. I don't know if they have an agreement with who knows who to not air them, but and now with the CGI effects you can do even from your house that are they're Hollywood perfection, really, and
right.
so many people can put out this phony stuff. It's technology is outpacing humanity. It's in a sad way,
Right.
in many ways. I mean, I'm in an airport terminal. I see literally about a 2-year-old kid playing with her iPad, and I'm like, man, that's sad. There goes their childhood.
No, I understand that's conversations many of us has had, and sometimes even myself. I find myself surfing and just scrolling for no apparent reason, as if I'm just being hypnotized. It's just the weirdest thing. I'm like, oh my God, an hour has gone by? What am I doing? I'm not even stopping anything. I'm just scrolling.
Just go into a restaurant. You see a couple that may be married or a blind date. Who knows what? They're once they order, they're just sitting there on their iPhones, not even talking to each other. The whole family, nobody. It's all with the iPhones or whatever phones they got. And there goes society as far as the idea of a family is a joke anymore.
Right. Well, there goes also the distraction, not only from society and socializing with people, but also from looking up in the skies. None of us look up in the skies anymore. We're always looking at our phones.
That's true too. Yeah. So it's who knows where this is all going. I would have, if somebody had told me, many years ago that by the time you're a certain age, it'd all be out to the public, that they kept this from you for a reason, and I would have never imagined this many years, and still. I don't really think we're that much closer, even with the internet putting out all this information. Nobody knows what to believe. A lot of them want to believe what they want and hope it's real. But overall, I think even if they saw it sitting on the White House lawn, they would think it was a Hollywood special effect or something.
Right.
So in my lifetime,
there's so much skepticism now. Yeah. And even when stuff does get in the news where they're talking about, yes, UFOs exist, this and that, it's not even making a big wave anymore.
No, it's like ho-hum. So I mean, I appreciate you letting me put out that dissertation, because that
absolutely
where that came from, it doesn't get any higher intelligence than that report. Yeah, I know it was condensed,
thank you.
but
that was fascinating.
Yeah.
No, it's fascinating for us to know that our first contact and encounters with these alien beings, that within our time, that can be documented. I mean, obviously we don't have 1,000 years ago, and maybe even certain parts maybe in the scripture may have been some alien encounters, stuff that's got lost over those years or transcribed into something else. But in our timeline within the last 100 years, I mean, the stuff that he shared is obviously fascinating. If we go back to Sumerians, the Egyptians, them talking about the aliens coming and the gods, and then we think that's just mythology or legends or just stories. Who knows? Maybe in our future, people are going to think that this stuff too is all just fiction. Who knows? Unless it eventually comes out.
Well, I mean, even in our country, the Mormon faith, if people really look at the history of that whole situation with the creation of that religion, it's pretty obvious from researchers it was created by a contact with an entity from another dimension, another world, and the golden plates, all that. I mean, and the Mormons have an extensive interest in this and library of UFO research materials. I can assure you that, because I bought a 50-year collection, and I beat them out by one day. I rushed out. I heard about it for sale at this rare place, and the Mormon church was going to come in and buy it on Monday, and the guy tipped me off. And I rushed out there and wrote out a check for thousands of dollars and got the collection, 50-year collection of it's a very rare collection. And so it's sitting in my garage, but I beat out them, the church that time, but they have a keen interest in this subject.
Well, you got a lot of books to write from that.
Oh, yeah. I won't live that long, but it's interesting. Now, getting on they're all tied together because energy is energy, whether it's these beings or the hereafter. But another very interesting man, a professor from Cal Berkeley, and he wrote a book, his first one, on his research of 2,300 regressions called Journey of Souls. Dr. Newton, had you heard of that book?
Yeah, I've got the book. I'm looking at my library right now where it is. There it is, Journey of Souls, and Newton, looking right at it.
So it's fascinating of how he condensed it down to the common, events that people, when you're just about to die, what are you seeing while they're under hypnosis? And then he narrowed down to those common sights that they were seeing, going through the tunnel and seeing the beings of light. And then you're talking about, you think you were Donald Trump or some super successful billionaire or whatever, and you had this fantastic life, and yet when you're doing the life review, that no, we don't care about that. What about the time when you were younger, you helped a blind lady across the street? That was him. That's what we're looking at as far as important things from your life. So everything you think was so big, important in this world, this classroom called life, isn't important at all. The real spectrum of things.
A lot of my listeners know about my one near-death experience I had in 2010, and I went to the bridge. And when I was at the bridge, I'm just going to share a brief moment with it, not the whole story, just this brief moment, is I told the guide, the spirit guide, that I don't want to go back, and free will is the law of the universe, so therefore, if I want to enter into heaven, I have to enter into heaven. He says, you're right, the free will is the law of the universe, and you have that ability, and we have to listen to what you want, but can I show you something? I said, there's nothing you can show me that's going to change my mind. He says, well, I would never change your mind. You would have to change your mind. And he says, can I show you? I said, sure, show me. And being a Taurus and being stubborn, I looked to the left, and I said,
you're a Taurus, I'm a Taurus.
Yeah, there you go.
Where you have the same birthday.
Right. Well, mine's May 13. When's yours?
April 28th.
Yeah, my dad was April 21st. He was a Taurus as well.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, please. It's interesting. I see these thousands of people, and I turn to the guy and I said, I don't know these people. Who are these people? He goes, I'm glad you asked. Remember, I'd have permission. He's like, I'm glad you asked me that, because now I can share. Those are all the people you haven't met yet. I turn to look at them again. I said, I don't know any of these people. And all of a sudden, flashes, like within 1 second, flashes from every single person of every single interaction that has not happened yet, but that needs to happen. And I look back at him with all this emotion because I felt every experience simultaneously, thousands of experiences simultaneously. And I felt every emotion involved. And it was so overwhelming, I started bawling and crying right in front of him. And I said, oh my God, it's not about me. It's about them. Send me back. Because I realized how important it was that I be there for each one of these individuals. Otherwise, the impact it would make of not being there. And it's not just my experience, it's everybody's experience. Everybody that is here now has that same interaction. And they may not realize it because a lot of these interactions we don't realize till later, the impact we made in that person's life or the impact they made in our life, that needs to continue. And removing from that equation creates this gigantic domino effect. So in what you're saying, that it's not about the successes and the rewards and the financials and all that, it's about the interactions and the experiences.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the big deals, years and years ago, there was a famous actor, Michael Landon, and he was on the cover of Life magazine with his new wife, and he was dying. Now, if there's anybody, she was Catholic, he was Jewish, and they said, if there's any, we will be open-minded to any possible process that could save Michael's life. So we got involved. I never met him. I met some of his family and his lawyer, and didn't know where he lived. But my friend remote viewed out and drew a map where to get to his house. We were thousands of miles away, so I went out there, and the house was right as she described, with the large oak fences and swimming pool, tennis courts, horse stables, and there's just hundreds of flowers in front of these big oak doors. So I had seen a healer man in Brazil, and I've seen him twice, John of God. I know there's this nasty, negative Netflix documentary about him right now, which is, to me, total lies, because I saw what he could do and had done for many, many years. And the equivalent of the AMA of Brazil had been trying to put him away for years because he was never charged, meet with over 1,000 people a day, 3 days a week for their healing. I watched him heal people blind since birth, cancer, you name it. So anyway, the whole concept is about reincarnation with his healing. If you don't believe in reincarnation, you wouldn't have been healed by John of God. So the deal with Michael was, we found out, I won't say how, but in many lives ago, he was a sheep herder that found out, the Romans found out he was, they recruited him, and he became very good at, as a soldier. And he never forgave himself for killing all these people. Right. So here, cancer is one of the illnesses that starts mentally and then becomes physical. And that's why there's many cases throughout time, especially modern times, of spontaneous remission of cancer. And I had 2 people that rented rooms for me, stage 4, and boy, within 6 months, it was gone. And Stanford Medical Center studied them. How did this happen? But that was a very interesting process with them. And they're alive today. We're talking like 35 years ago. They had this cancer and they're still alive. So I tried to, we sent messages every day, FedEx to Michael's house, trying to get him to believe in this possibility and go to see John of God. And it was, so anyway, by the time one day he was looking at his horses, and I said, maybe if we can read his mind this far away, because he sees where the tape's coming from, maybe he'll believe us. So she said, he's looking at his horses and he's wondering, I wonder where horses go when they die. And so we sent him this message the next day, FedEx. And he was like stunned, we found out later. But by then it was too late. And he told his family, if there is life after death, I'll say these words. And so I ended up about a year and a half after his death, went and had a reading from that medium that's still alive. He's very gifted, Dr. Reverend Reed Brown. I don't know if he's still doing readings or not, and so he tape records it, gives it to you, and you only get one reading a year. And so he's talking, and all of a sudden my mom's coming through. He's giving her name, and then my sister, and then a friend of mine I grew up with was killed in a ski accident. He called me he called me this nickname, and he starts coming through, calling me my nickname and telling me about my flying career. And all of a sudden, wait a minute, I got somebody coming through here. So hold on. And they really want to talk to you. And he starts giving the secret message from Michael Landon. And he says it 3 times. I got it on tape. And then he goes, I'm sorry, I didn't believe you, or thank you for trying to save me. And you know how he had a great sense of humor. And he says, I want to help you right now. I'm unemployed. And he starts for 3 more readings. He came through every time with the code message of the game. And I tried to call his family about it, and they basically threw me off the phone. Just said, don't ever call here again. I don't know how you got our number.
No.
How dare you? This and that. It was really sad.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Well, I want to thank you we've covered so many different topics. We talked about aliens, UFOs, auras, psychics, healings.
Yeah.
And we can go on and on, because the interesting thing is a lot of this is just interconnected in so many different ways.
Oh yeah.
We
haven't even got into the finding the buried treasure that I was guided to.
Yeah. I know, because you and I spoke just briefly before we started this. before we end this, because we're going almost on 2 hours, this will be the
Oh,
longest
no.
podcast. No, this will be the longest podcast I've ever done, which is perfectly fine because I am so intrigued by everything that you've discussed, stuff that people have never heard before, that you've learned or experienced yourself, as well as top individuals in the field that have released this information to you. Is there anything remaining that you would like to share with us before we end this podcast?
Yeah, I would. We're all connected, as you and I have talked, and I have absolutely no fear of death and no fear of. I don't want people to think these entities are evil. It's a large universe out there, and they're really not. I'd like to say they come in peace, but they come in definitely intrigued with us for whatever reason. But they aren't here to harm us. They could have taken us over a long time ago. So all these rumblings of eating children and everything, and the negative things, it's just not true. And if it was, I would tell you and I'd warn you, but it's not. And it's sad that it's come to that where those rumors have gotten out there. And so we are all connected. And this little old lady, or even somebody you can't stand, maybe in another lifetime that you were related or married to them or who knows what. So, self-forgiveness is so important in this lifetime, I found out. And just don't let people take away and your energy, and just stay as positive as you can with every day, because every day is valuable. And there are people in the Himalayas, and I've been up there and met with them and learned from them, and they bless every cell in their body every day, because every cell in your body is a living energy. And they live long lives, especially the country of Hunza, where they die of old age. There's no illness. They don't have birth certificates. The average age they pass away is about 150. You can go on with the Walt Disney only documentary really done on Hunza, Hunza, on their lifestyle. And he did the movie with Art Linkletter in 1958 to try to discuss. He'd heard about this place, and he sent the expedition. And it's a fascinating place. I'd really like to go there, but it's a little dangerous right now because of Pakistan and stuff. But check out Hunza and how they think, but they bless every cell in their body every day. And they're a very unique scientific study, but because there's no birth certificates, there's not proof of how long they live. Take a look at that YouTube video on Hunza done by Disney. It's only like 40 minutes long, but plagues like that and places like that, just believe that there's so much more than we're taught about life, and believe that just positive energy goes a long way.
Right. Well, thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it. And, I wish you all the best. I do want to be in touch with you in the future here after when I get back from my trip, because I would like to just personally, privately speak with this one woman regarding the auras and stuff like that, because I do have a couple questions for myself.
Yeah, I can't guarantee anything on that, but
I know
it's anything's possible. But the old saying by Will Rogers, one friend is worth a million strangers, and let's stay friends.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'm just going to end the podcast, but don't hang up. This is Chris Fleming, and you've been listening to the special guest. We're just going to call him Jim on this episode of Spirit Talk. I will see you next episode. Thanks for listening.